Hey everyone, and welcome to another episode of The Bottom Line. I'm your host, Lauren Kalil. If you like listening to us chat about CrossFit news and everything that's going on in the sport, make sure to like and subscribe to our channel. On today's episode, we have some of the best sports analysts in the game discussing their 2022 post-quarterfinals worldwide power rankings. We have Brian Friend, Patrick Clark, and Chad Schroeder. All welcome to the show. It's going to be a fun one, guys.
That's an I just want to say...
Thank you, Brian. I wrote it myself.
I just want to start off by saying that I'm honored to be, in such a great company like Chad and yourself, Lauren.
Thank you. Not Brian.
Brian. Oh, sorry, Brian. There he is.
Yeah, Chad, this is the first time we've had you on the show. It's good to have you here.
Yes, thank you. I really appreciate it. I'm looking forward to it. Yeah, I've been watching a lot of you guys' different shows, so this was a fun one. Thanks for having me on with this.
Yeah, I'm excited to go through your different rankings. When you guys wrote the article, there was also Chase Ingraham and Tommy Marquez. They both contributed to the piece where each analyst was responsible for ranking athletes on both the men's and women's side 1 through 20. Since that article was posted, though, there were a couple of updates. I'm going to bring up the men's side. Brian, you contributed to this piece and you did some adding once it was released with the 21s. What's going on when we especially look at the right column?
Yeah, we just got some feedback from some people in the community that are, stats guys, and they said some of the athletes that were selected by a couple of the analysts, but not all the analysts, were being probably weighted too heavily because we just had a kind of a dash as a placeholder there. So instead, they suggested this, and we went with it. So we just added 21s in all the spots where previously there'd been basically a non-ranking, which balances out for the fact that someone or some, but not all of the analysts had them necessarily in their top 20. So it's all the same names, all the same rankings, but just better representation of what the five of us kind of thought as a whole about those athletes that weren't included by everyone.
When it comes to ranking these athletes, we'll get to some of the specifics shortly, but I want to first look at the rankings for 18th, 19th, and 20. How difficult is it, and how do you decide who those last athletes are that squeeze into the top 20 for each side? Chad, let's start with you.
Yeah, I don't think I ranked the lower half any different from the first half as an approach. I just laid them all out. Actually, for a baseline, I took the quarterfinal worldwide ranking just I needed a starting point, and then just started shuffling up and down the leaderboard. So, and it was just, I was looking at obviously the quarterfinal ranking, your open ranking, but then their games placement and then off-season competition. So it was just shuffling around. So it wasn't really anything different on the top or the bottom. And then I could have gone down to 30 as well. There were so many others that were in consideration. So it was tough, but yeah, it was just kind of shifted up and down basing kind of who's better than who, head to head. And so.
PC, how do you decide who squeezes into the top 20?
Well, I usually, the last couple weeks, I've kept a top 10, and then I'd shuffle the top 10 in and out. And then I guess it was a couple months ago, Brian, I'll give Brian credit for this. He kind of played a game with me where he was trying to figure out his first composite rankings, and he started playing a little game with me in terms of who I would rank, who I think is better than this person based on current client, and taking into account, like I said, live competitions, past performance, all that stuff. And I kind of use a combination of that, of what Brian did with me, and I just kind of play that game myself, using all those factors involved, which, like Chad mentioned, off-season competitions, open quarterfinals, and of course Brian does a really good job with this. He's a big proponent of experience, and I use that as well. And then I also throw my little spin in there where I've been lucky enough in terms of in terms of other analysts that I actually get to see a lot of these athletes inside the gym, outside of the competition space, and see how they train, how they perform. And I get to see some of those strengths and weaknesses that they normally don't get to show off at competition.
Brian, what about you?
That cut line at 20, like Chad said, is tough. There's plenty of other athletes that are surely deserving to be mentioned in a conversation like this. Kind of for me, I do lean heavily, as Patrick referred to, on experience. There's some athletes coming up in this sport that are very, very exciting, talented, good, and I have high hopes that if they make it to the games, that they can do very well there. But getting to the games is challenging, and so I kind of when I was looking at the last couple spots in. If it was going between a guy like Alex Vigneault and Phil Toon, I would defer to Vigneault, the guy who's done it before, who's gotten there 3, 4, 5 times and done well at the games. And whereas Phil Toon, obviously, he's a good example of one of these people who's an up-and-comer, who's got a ton of potential. I'm not quite sure how good he can be. If he qualifies for the games, and now we have a set field, it's very likely he shows up in the top 20. But at this point in the season, having never seen him do it before, I kind of just would bump him out at the expense of the guys who are regularly showing up for the games every year.
Let's pull up now the men's leaderboard that you guys ranked them in. We're going to start with, obviously, unanimous placing of Justin Medeiros there in first. Patrick Vellner also in second, but then we move down to fourth. PC, we'll start with you. Why did you choose to put Brent Fikowski all the way in 10th?
I know why. He had him 11th last year, so he was like, I got to get him in the top 10 somehow.
Got to squeeze him in this year.
Yeah, as Brian never let me live that one down for when we kind of did like a games rankings last year. I had Fikowski at 11th, and of course,
you're doing it again.
I don't think he's going to let you live it down, especially 2 years in a row.
Well, he's in the top 10, but I infamously did have Hopper, on the podium last year as well. So, yeah, I just, Fikowski's kind of one of those. I talk about like seeing athletes in person. And I've yet to have the pleasure outside of the games environment. I've yet to see, he didn't do any off-season competitions. There's always that question, and he'll deny saying, he wasn't injured and this and that. But I don't know. I mean, obviously, looking at, you can't really base his performance off the open. So he's kind of an X factor for me. So I didn't want to over-rank him. I mean, he obviously, based off experience, he deserves at least a top 5. But at the same time, I saw there's a lot of other athletes that I've seen in person and doing competitions that, are deservingly to be in the top 5 as well. So it was kind of hard. It really is. It's not like I have anything against Mr. Fikowski there, the professor, but it's just how things lied out when I laid them out for myself.
All right, Chad, we'll go to you next. He didn't even make the top 5 for you. So you ranked him a little bit better there in 7th, but still not in top 5. Why did you choose him there?
It's similar to what Patrick was saying. He's coming off a supposed injury, but I'm sure he's healing up. He's been in this game a long time. He knows what he's doing, but it's just the limited data. He doesn't do many. Well, I guess he has done some off-season competitions in the past, but not this last off-season, probably to make sure he's fully healthy for this year. So there's that question mark. I think I could easily see him being third again. I want to see what happens in semifinals, and I think after that I would probably adjust him higher, based on that. So I was just a little cautious on that. But then again, last year he just, semifinals just kind of squeaked into that last spot. And then look, it was third place at the games, and that's kind of how he is. He shows up big time at the games. So I probably will, as we get closer to the games for a power ranking, I'd probably rank him higher, but it's just kind of more cautious at this point.
Brian, you were confident this early in the game. You put him on the podium, third place. Where does that confidence come from that you think he will perform once he gets to the games?
Just the fact that I think he's the type of guy who, if he didn't think he had it for the season, he probably wouldn't do the season. And he knows how to manage himself and get ready in basically an 11-month time frame to be ready to go at the games. And especially now, he'll have taken a look at what this season is and understand how he needs to perform in the Open, the quarterfinals, just to get to the semifinals. Like Chad said, semifinals will be super important for us to see Fikowski out there because we haven't seen him in a long time. But based on everything I know about his career, as long as he is healthy, he's, kind of a permanent fixture up there in the top 4 at the games ever since he got to the games. And I'm excluding the years that were not what we're used to seeing in the normal games format, and we'll likely see again this year. So until someone moves him out, I'm going to keep him up there.
Okay, fair. Moving right past him to Saxon. Brian, you say he's not in the top 10, but Chad says he is going to stand on the podium in third. Let's talk about him.
Saxon Panchik, yeah, very curious to see how he does this year. He certainly could come out and have his best year ever. Switching to proven and having that new training environment might be really good for him. But I just think in general that the men's field is gaining a lot of momentum and steam, and that there's some athletes who did well last year, and Guimayeros and Lazar Jukic, and some athletes who weren't in the field last year, and Roman Krenikov and Ricky Garrard, that are going to make it. That they are going to make waves inside the top 10, and that some of the guys that were finishing really high there last year aren't this year. And Saxon, he's very, very consistent, but doesn't have like that big home run hit ever really. So I kind of think that some of the guys that can in the games format will have the potential to surpass him this year, and it doesn't necessarily mean that he's gotten worse.
Yeah, for me, I'm looking at Saxon and kind of the momentum. I mean, he's built up a head of steam so far, winning the Open. I forgot, it's like top 5, 4, I can't remember, in the worldwide ranking on the quarterfinals, and at proven now. So it just feels like it's all going that direction. I mean, we've seen this before, though. Early season success doesn't pan out the games, but he's got all that games experience. It feels like he's going that direction. But yeah, sometimes, I mean, he's had some really good games and some off games. So it just feels though, for me, he's got that momentum going.
And PC, you put him in fourth, just outside of the podium.
Yeah. I mean, I could easily put him at third as well, or fifth. I mean, he's just one of those. I think for me, the determining factor for me was him going to proven, and his training partner is Tia now. So we've seen what happens when Tia trained her male athlete. Granted, she had nothing to do with. I mean, Matt was already successful, but I think because of he's training with Tia, it's gonna up his game. He's gonna become a better athlete because of that. And by better athlete, I think a top 5 caliber athlete, which he was on the cusp of doing already the last 3 years. I mean, obviously he's been a top 10 finisher the last 3 years, I believe. I don't recall what he finished in 2020. I think he was right out of the top 5. But yeah, just the potential off of that.
Let's move just a little bit further down the leaderboard. In 7th, we have Jeffrey Adler, another person that it was far from unanimous. Brian doesn't even have him in the top 10, but Patrick and Chad, you have him in 3rd on the podium, and then in 5th. Why is there so discrepancy with this athlete?
I guess I'll start again here with having the lowest ranking for him. It's kind of a similar answer to Saxon, is that Adler's really good, but I'm just wondering with the strength of the top of the men's field right now if that 13th place finish is pretty close to his ceiling. And I kind of feel like 9th might be the absolute best he could do at the games with this field of men that we have right now. And that's, again, not a slight at him or even necessarily saying that he's moving backwards at all. I just think it's a really strong field.
The reason why I have him at 3rd is just based off of what he did at Rogue, a combination of what he did at Rogue and what he did at Dubai. He finished 3rd at Rogue and he finished 4th at Dubai, and 2 different type of programming tests. They're CrossFit, but obviously, a lot of people came into these thinking Adler was more of a strength-based type of athlete. But what we saw at Rogue and what I really saw at Wodapalooza, not Wodapalooza, but at Dubai was his capacity. He's really been working. He knows that's been a weakness for him, was his capacity, and he's really tried to work on that. Him and his fiance and / coach, and you kind of saw that in the Open and the quarterfinals, where the Open and quarterfinals have a tendency to test capacity, engine work, and he did really well in those. So I just took what he's done since the games and actually removed the games altogether and looked at him in terms of this new athlete that I think he's becoming. And, if he's maintained a strength, I mean, head to head when it comes to, strength, I think outside of he's someone, I mean, Guy's at a different level, but Adler's in that next level low Guy. And so if he can put all that together, which I think he can, there's no reason why he can't be on the podium.
And I'll just piggyback off of a lot of what Patrick said. It's kind of what Patrick said is what reason why I had him that high. And I don't know what happened at the games last year. I didn't check. It seemed like he was off maybe something was wrong. I'm not quite sure, but he came back and then just like a month later did great at Rogue, as Patrick said. So I think maybe he just had an off games, but his fitness was still there and he trended in the right direction, like great in the quarterfinals again. So yeah, I like where he's at higher up there.
And the one thing I'll say about Adler is, last year was the first time we got to see him at a traditional games setting. He in 2019, he only got to do a few events before getting cut. And in 2020, it was just a strange format. Obviously, he did great in that format. So this will be a good tell for us if what Chad's saying is maybe an anomaly for him at the games, or if some people can do really well in off-season competitions and just struggle to put it together at the games where the pressure is greatest, where the field of competitors is the best. So we'll learn a lot about Adler at this year's games, I think.
What Brian just said there is like we have athletes that do really well in these off-season competitions, but we don't know how to do in the games. I think that's a prime example of what we're looking to see, because we've seen Roman at all these off-season competitions, and he's so and you'll see it reflected on our list. Kind of an X factor in there. I mean, we're basing off of Roman. We're basing anything off potential and what we've seen in off-season competitions. So we don't know how he's going to do in the games, but it'll be exciting to see.
Even when it comes to Roman, though, I mean, you guys were pretty not too far off from ranking him. Why is there so much consistency with an athlete like him who we've never seen compete at the games?
I would say it's just that, he has consistently been kind of cleaning up in like what I was call like A tier or like the next step down type of competitions across Europe and Asia where he's able to compete. And the last time that we did see him in a big setting, which was a 10 test event in Dubai in 2019, he held his own against some of the best in the world. So all those things are suggestive that he has what it takes to have a great performance at the games. But Patrick's right. Until you do it there is that a certain unknown element of how he'll handle that. Yeah,
I think we're all excited to see him live at the games. He was at the 2020 games, but the stage one, doing it at your own gym. So, but yeah, he's just doing great with these off-season events. And one thing I noticed too that he's really improved on the last couple of years is his strength. Like initially, he wasn't as strong, but like he's really amped that up. He did really well in the other total. And so he's picking that up and now, getting a little tips at Mayhem. And I guess he's heading to Florida eventually here to train with the Ute guys, or the Brute guys. So it should be interesting to see. I'm excited to see him at the games.
Moving now to the women's field, no surprise here at the top of the leaderboard, unanimous with Tia Claire Toomey. But then I want to focus in on how you guys ranked athletes 2 through 6. Laura, Gabby, Cara, Mel, and Haley. It was kind of, it almost seems like you put their names in a hat, you shuffled them around, and each of you picked on how you would rank these. So I just want to go around with each of you on how you decided where to place the 2 through 6s on the women's side. Brian, you can start.
I'll go ahead, Brian.
Oh, sorry, Pat. Too slow.
Yeah. Well, I kind of started with Haley Adams because in the last 3 games, she's finished 5th, 4th, and 6th. But of the athletes that beat her in those years, most of them are gone from the sport. Carrie Pierce is gone. Jamie Green's coming back from injury now. Kristen Holt is gone. Carrie, who had beaten her again, Kristen had beaten her again, and Annie's gone. So you're really only left with Katrin and Laura, who'd beaten her of the remaining women in the field at the games. And similar to Adler, with only 3 games experiences, last year was her first time there. And I'm not actually sure if the format favored her or not. She did pretty poorly on the events once the field was cut relative to the field. But if the entire field was there, she might have even done worse. So it could be a little bit risky. We don't know the format for the games this year, which makes it tough. But I also felt that there were more tests than usual that would be very detrimental to her relative to her peers. And I think that she's consistently getting stronger. So just kind of banking on the fact that she has consistently performed well at the games. I think that this year's games test is likely to be a little more favorable for her overall than last year's, and she'll be a little bit stronger. So I'm going to say that until these women can beat her at the games, I have her kind of their 3rd, and I just kind of slotted some people in based on that.
PC?
Yeah, like I said, it's kind of almost like pulling from a hat. And I love what Brian did right there. I wish I would have thought something as cool as that. But no, mine was kind of based. Mine was kind of
We
based off
all
just.
aspire to be as cool as Brian Friend.
I don't know about that, but yeah, like I went with Kara because Kara, I mean, barring last year, she's always been there. I mean, Tia dominates, but it always seems like Kara, especially when they go head to head, it's like she's right there with her. I mean, she's behind her, but I wouldn't say right there with her because obviously there's a huge margin there. But that I just think Kara's coming back. I mean, she looked strong in 2020, right off of that pregnancy. Just missed the top 5. Making it to the ranch, and then last year she was doing well until she got COVID, and then physically, and then just being away from family at the games last year, you could see that was not the right one and right Cara Saunders. So this year, I think she has it figured out. She's doing mayhem programming. She just looked good through the first couple stages of the Open, and then Gabby and Laura was kind of just a toss up. I mean, obviously Laura has the experience. She's been in the podium twice, but the way I look at it in terms of the games. I mean, Horvath is stronger than Gabby is, but I think Gabby's a better all-around CrossFitter and has less holes than Laura has. Obviously, we know Laura has a major hole when it comes to sit pushing, but Gabby doesn't have that. And I think when you put those two in an overall test, especially now, Gabby being the better overall CrossFitter, she would do a lot better at the games than Laura would right now, barring that one strength event or heavy event. And then obviously, I think at this point, I think Mallory is ahead of Haley at this point in the season. I think Haley right now she's still on a strength cycle, which is she's getting stronger. And I think those are two they could be interchangeable as well. Very interested to see what Haley does this year. Like I saw her a couple days when I saw her for a couple days during the Open. She's bigger, she's stronger. She went through like a 12-week squat cycle. She had a bad taste in her mouth from last year, not doing well in those strength events. And she knows she's stronger than that, and she wants to prove people wrong. And she looks like she's on that path to doing that. So it'll be very interesting to see.
Yeah, for me, I was the highest on Gabby. I think she's got that momentum going at that right time of her stage in her career. Did great at Rogue or at the games, then Rogue, then Dubai. So I feel that momentum's all going there, and she's probably I felt like the best skill set for the games going in for games type of programming. Obviously, Laura is amazing, except for those deficit or strict handstand push-ups. We saw it again in quarterfinals. It affected her. Take that out, she's right up there, maybe not close to Tia, but closer than without that. But then those weren't in the games last year, so they couldn't come up, and that always knocks her down. When you look at Laura's history, when those events happen, she is off the podium. But if it's a kipping, handstand push-up or something along those lines, she's been on podiums either at the games or at other like sanctional events. So it's really kind of dependent on that for her. Kara, I did rank her down a bit. I know her capacity is amazing, but I mean, maybe those little longer endurance events we see at the games, it's going to, I think, hit her a little harder relative to the rest of the field, but it's still, kind of question mark. I know she's right there still. So Mal, I did rank up higher. Everything's, again, I'm kind of going with a lot of momentum on my picks here too. I think she's just trending in all the right directions right now, obviously with the Open and quarterfinals, what she did last year with Proven or not Proven, I'm sorry, with Frazier, hard work pays off and such. Just getting all his tips and such. I mean, her strength maybe is her weakness, but it's still really good. I mean, for her size, and that's where she's ahead of Haley on that, where Haley is just amazing on everything except the strength. I think Mal is just right there, like with Haley, but stronger. So, and then all the other stuff she's just honing in. So, yeah, those top 6. I know, Brian, I think you mentioned it before. Like they're really, there's a demarcation line, I think, after that. So, yeah, it'll be interesting to see how they play out.
And it's kind of cool as along the lines of Kara too. I mean, she's giving up like 7 to 12 years against this group of athletes.
Yeah.
So she is kind of like the last one of, we talked about how Annie's moved on to the teams and Kristen and Carrie have retired. But from that group of women that was really relevant at the games going back to even 2013-14, she's kind of the only one that's still hanging around and making her case for a top 5 position. And it'll be fun to see if she can kind of fend off some of these young up and comers this year.
When are you guys going to update your next power rankings? Will you do it after semifinals?
I think that makes sense. We'll probably do it. I think we can do it after semifinals before the last chance qualifier, because there's like 3-4 weeks off there, and we can have something to talk about with the majority of the games field. Obviously, we'll factor in whoever ends up making it through from the last chance qualifier prior to the games. But after the 4th week of semis seems like a pretty good time. I
love that you guys are doing this. This is so fun with the sport, and you see it in other sports. So CrossFit should have something like this, and all of the Excel spreadsheets that go into this and the thought process. I love it. Brian, Chad, PC, thank you guys so much for joining us on this episode of The Bottom Line, and we will look forward to seeing the next power rankings coming out after semis.